Hello everybody, and welcome to another video. Today I thought I'd do another episode of the Q&A, so we don't fall behind with them. And I wanted to address something before we go into some new questions as well that we were talking about last week. And this was the idea of where do we get Mordemoth's name from? I was wrong last week, so there's sort of two elements to this that I felt were bad about the story. Number one was, how do we randomly know Mordemoth's name, which is what a lot of people have been talking about. Number two was, how do we even know there was a dragon in the first place? And so last week I was asked, hey, how did we know about Mordemoth's name? And my response was, oh, we knew because it was this mail we got sent from E, and I was wrong. The mail didn't tell us Mordemoth's name, it just dealt with that other thing. It told us, oh, there is a dragon. So that was their sudden answer. Oh, here's how your players know that there's a dragon. The name part in particular, you guys are totally right, they really dropped the ball on it. There wasn't any indication that we should have known Mordemoth's name at all. They just randomly threw it in there at the start of patch 2. I think, given what's going on with the current story, a very slight spoiler here, but the stuff with Traherne, like the fact he sent us this mail, I feel like maybe Traherne will give us a little bit more elaboration on it. Really, if you think about any of the characters that would have known Mordemoth's name, it would have been the Pale Tree. So maybe they'll set up some kind of story where it's like, oh yeah, all the Sylvari in the Grove heard Mordemoth's roar, the Pale Tree told them that it was Mordemoth and it was now the dragon, and the rumour spread, and now our characters randomly know. It's not very well done though at all. Maybe they can shoehorn it in a bit, but yeah, I agree, it is something to complain about. Alright, anyway, so yeah, on to the new questions. The first one's from Gizmo Monster, who says, hey WP, what are your thoughts on Power Rangers being viable? If you heard the recent changes that they'll make to Rangers and Engineers, I did look at these changes. They look pretty interesting. This is obviously specifically, I guess, a question angled for World vs. World / PvP. Power Rangers have always been a really funny, massive gimmick thing in PvP. I don't see these changes making them super viable there, just because of the way Conquest works that forces a lot of close quarters damage. Yes, range has its place, but like, if you're thinking of Longbow Rangers becoming more viable in PvP, obviously they are going to be more viable because they're getting buffs, but I don't think they're going to become like kings or end up swarming all over the place. I do still think they're going to be a little bit of a gimmick. Overall, I think that the changes look really cool. I've been mostly playing PvE though, so I can't talk about PvP or even World vs. World balance that much anymore. But I certainly do want to play with my longbow a bit more, just for fun, just while running around in PvE. It sounds fun that after the patch we'll have this massive damage on the longbow, and the longbow 2 in particular will trigger really quickly. Like, you could pop a quickening Zephyr and then just spam it and just machine gun someone down very, very fast. That seems fun. The one change I didn't like that they did with the Ranger though was the auto attack. One of the most fun things about longbow that stops it feeling like a crappy spammy weapon like the shortbow does was the fact that this skill 1 had this slight play to it, that the further away you were, the more damage you'd be doing. I liked that. I thought that should have been encouraged. So yeah, buff the weapon, but don't remove what made it kind of fun to play with. Now it's far less punishing to stay at point blank range, and it's less fun to be really far away and see significantly bigger numbers. I don't know. I just think it's kind of lame what they did there. I don't think they should have changed the auto in the way they did. Anyway, I don't want to talk about all the balanced stuff. NGs have got some cool stuff too, so we'll just leave it there. The next question is from Yusmas, who says, hey WP, 2 related questions. Generally, what are your thoughts on dividing skills in PvP and PvE? I thought it was fine in Gw1 except for Smiter's Boon. Specifically, why do you think that ArenaNet has been reluctant to divide skills in PvP and PvE? Smiter's Boon, a lot of you guys won't know this. It was this ridiculous nerf that they absolutely punished the hell out of this skill for Gw1. So I'll explain it to you guys because I think this is just a fantastic story, okay? It was a buff that you could give to yourself in the first game, right? And this meant that as you were a monk, if you were playing a very offensive monk, you would get like innate healing on many of your abilities that was doubled. So it was a very powerful ability, but pretty much balanced as far as PvE was concerned. However, in PvP, it was pretty broken, it was too strong, so they nerfed it only for PvP. They gave it like the max amount of energy it could cost. This was 25 energy. I really have no frame of reference I could give Gw2 only players. They gave it a 90-second cooldown, which was huge for Guild Wars 1, and they reduced the buff's duration from 30 seconds to just 5. They destroyed the skill. The only thing that they could have nerfed harder was its cast time, which they left the same, a quarter of a second. Ridiculous, and sort of an example of this crazy extreme. Something is meant to work in one format and it's just been crippled and destroyed in the other. They only ever really did that with Smiter's Boon. Most of the other balances were somewhat intelligent and left some room for play in both formats. But you know, I chose this question because I find it really funny that early on, before Guild Wars 2's release, one of the main things they touted about the way they were going to deal with this game was a splitting of PvE and PvP skills. Guild Wars 1 had tons of skills, the balance got crazy, it was really very flawed. And for a long time throughout that game's lifespan, there was no splitting of PvE and PvP, and so you had tons of skills that were just absolute trash, either in just one format, multiple formats, or all formats of the game, just trash skills. Finally, a few years into the game's life, they decided, right, we're going to start splitting stuff, and this was a huge success. Yes, there were some horror stories, like with Smiter's Boon, but it really improved the amount of balance changes that they could make and fun things they could do with the skills. It was a huge positive. The devs recognized that in Guild Wars 1, and when Guild Wars 2 was coming out, they were specifically saying, yeah, you know, we learned lessons with Guild Wars 1. We learned that this was a really important thing, and we're definitely going to be doing it in Guild Wars 2. And so through this, you'll see that, you know, the skills have got lots of flair to them, lots of interest, and many different things will be viable. And then they'd segue that comment into, you know, like their new skill system or something. They said that all the time. And now they have been so conservative in Guild Wars 2 to ever do it, even remotely. And I think it's a huge mistake, okay? As a player, okay, I'm going to be a little bit big-headed here, right? As a player that has spent a lot of time in PvE, and while in PvE, a lot of time doing the various formats PvE has to offer, and also as a player who played a lot of PvP, got Dragon Rank the instant that update came out, was frequently fairly okay on leaderboards, played in structured teams, and as someone who is now rank 440 in World vs. World, I would say I have a general understanding of all of these game types, okay? And despite this, I have absolutely zero confidence in my own ability to balance skills appropriately. Once you've played enough of those formats of the game, you realize how ridiculously complicated Guild Wars 2 is, and to adhere to one proposed change from some PvE open world player without considering its impact on the other areas of the game makes it very hard to make any intelligent decisions about where you balance skills. I do not envy the balance team at ArenaNet even slightly, and what's worrying is I know for a fact they've probably played the game a hell of a lot less than I do. So what they have to do is pick one of these game types and say, right, this is primarily what we're balancing for. We'll have caution to other game types, but we have to primarily balance for one, and that's been PvP. And that's left a lot of other things in the game lackluster, and it's meant that we haven't had many exciting changes, and it's meant that we've had, what, one real balance update this entire year? It's a ridiculous way to go on, so I just ask, why are you so scared of splitting these skills? Why don't you have specific balance teams looking at specific areas of the game and empower them to make changes specific to those places? Why are you so scared when you realize how positive it was in the first game to do it? When you were saying pre-launch that this was what you were going to do. And, you know, the only legitimate argument I can see them ever coming up with is, oh, you know, it heightens the learning curve. Oh, we're scared that, you know, people will have to learn one game when they're in PvE and then a totally different game when they're in PvP. I think that argument holds so little weight. Maybe it's got some value, right? And yeah, maybe you do have to moderate slightly what you're splitting, but not to the extent that they currently are. It's already a situation where a PvE player that tries to go to PvP isn't going to have a damn clue what's going on. Splitting the skills isn't going to exacerbate it that much. People moving to PvP, they have to sit there and learn anyway. They have to go through this relearning process, and splitting skills isn't going to add that much to the pile. I think it's one of the really dumb things they've done with Guild Wars 2, and I don't think it's going to change for a long while either. But yeah. Next question is going to be a quick one from Diego Benitez, who says, now that you have a new post-April patch character and did a soft reset, how do you feel about the trait system? I really enjoy the new trait system. You know, it's funny, I did this whole commentary about specifically the idea of exploring the world to acquire new traits. I think this has been really, really positive, and I have like a 15-minute recording of me talking about and just how much I love it. And after I did that that recording, which isn't in a video on the channel anyway, yeah, I'm trying to find a place I can shoehorn it in, I saw a Reddit thread very recently, like last week, with a bunch of people just complaining about the new system with these completely misguided accusations and arguments about how the new trait system is terrible for the game, and it was infuriating. Usually I feel like I'm quite on side with the community, but that specifically was crazy for me to see. It all started with this guy making this post saying, oh yeah, you know, Guild Wars 2 is great, but I've just finished my character. I have like 33% world completion. I'm level 80. Clearly this guy just rushed through everything as fast as he could, and he's like, oh look, I've got no traits available. It's like, what are you talking about? How has this got anything to do with the strength of the system when you clearly just spammed your way through stuff? I think the community in general might see these changes negatively because they they come from a Guild Wars 2 where they didn't have to like go to this extra effort. So nobody wants to appreciate the positive things it's done for the game. I think it's incredibly good that the Chinese players started playing a Guild Wars 2 where this system was in place. I think it's fantastic. It's just an example of where you can introduce something that is much better for the game and much better for the gameplay, but a lot of people will just see it as an inconvenience and they can't see the bigger picture. But yeah, I think it's great. I had a lot of fun with it. I thought it encouraged me to use utility skills and weapons I wouldn't normally have considered. It forced me to keep swapping my builds up. It taught me the way that the ranger worked better. It encouraged me to play with guildies more than I otherwise would have while leveling, because sometimes it was killing champions. It made me go to places in the game I wouldn't have normally gone to, like the Font of Rand and many of the cool mini dungeons. It's a fantastic system. It gives me more stuff to do at the end of the game when I hit level 80. Brilliant. And they offered people a way around it through spending money, through spending skill points, adding more value to the skill points in particular as a currency. And that's about it for me. As I said, I've got a much longer discussion, but this isn't the time or place. Next question's not really Guild Wars 2 related. Hey Tatoes, I noticed you mentioned a Rooster Teeth podcast during one of your Final Fantasy X episodes, and remembering your fondness for Halo, I assume you watched Red vs. Blue. Who was or is your favourite character if you did? I did watch it. I haven't watched like the past 3 or 4 seasons. I'm not sure if I want to get back into it. It's like what I was talking about with the Mass Effect thing last episode. It's like if I go back into it, I'm going to want to watch all the old stuff, and it's a very long series. My favourite character though is Donut. I think that guy is hilarious. Just everything about this meta joke where he's just this normal guy wearing pink armor, and then everyone starts ripping on him for being campy and flamboyant, and then slowly as the series goes on he gets more and more so. I think it's hilarious. I think Donut's great and he should be in it more. 3 Nimiak says, do you still use a standing desk? It's been a while since you mentioned it. I wonder if you got used to it or you gave up. I am currently on my standing desk. Every video I've recorded since I started using the standing desk, I've been on the standing desk. I much prefer to talk into a microphone while I'm stood up. It allows you to enunciate much better. I get a lot more freedom. It's just better. That said though, recently I haven't been using it that much. When I first started using it, I was basically using it permanently, like all the time, to the point where, so I have a hardwood chair, right? A lot of people will cringe at that thought, hardwood chair. Well, I got it a long time ago. You know, you sit on a hardwood chair. At first it makes like your arse ache or whatever, but you get used to it, right? And then you're like, oh yeah, this is actually a comfy chair. Well, I used my standing desk for so long that it then became very uncomfortable to sit in that chair again for me. And I found I had so much more energy just like fidgeting around all the time. So I'd constantly want to come back up and use it. Anyway, I did a big long recording session of Final Fantasy X over a period of like 2 days. I recorded maybe 14 to 15 hours of that series. All of it I was stood up 100% of the time, and I was stood in a weird way. And I like did something to my leg where my thigh was constantly numb. So I took that as a sign to start sitting down again, and now I'm a lot more balanced. It's probably like 50-50 whichever I'm using. I'd still recommend it 100% by the way for people. Just don't spend your entire life stood up. It's probably not good. The next question's a fairly long one. Hopefully I can be succinct with the answer. It's from Ray Brooks, who says, hey WP, so I've been playing Guild Wars 2 since launch basically, but I don't have a legendary weapon yet. Now the thing is, when the game came out, I spent too much time into exploring and leveling the classes I liked the most and stuff. So I didn't really take legendaries as a priority back then. But now I compare the prices of things like precursors, the mats and all that, to what they were back then, and I regret not paying attention to this before, since I really want a legendary now. So I'd like to know your opinion on all of this overpriced TP stuff, and if you think the prices might lower sometime, or will it actually get worse? People need to learn what inflation is, okay? Now, for the record, this is kind of a fine line to walk. I do believe getting a legendary in today's Guild Wars 2 is a little harder than it was at launch. But that has nothing to do with the price of precursors or the price of your gift of fortune or anything like that, okay? This is just inflation in the game's general economy, which happens in every MMO ever, unless it has some fantastic, like, airtight gold sync system, which I've never heard of before. What you have to appreciate is in Guild Wars 2 now, there are much better rewards for dungeons, people clear dungeons much quicker, there are champ boxes and various well-known farms throughout the entire game, okay? Not only this, but you also have a population of players now who are done leveling to 80, they have all their gear, they're not spending a bunch of money on early game syncs, and so the general amount of gold your average active player has is higher. This means they're willing to spend more money on things on the trading post. This means that the prices have gone up. But equally, even if you're a new person who's coming into Guild Wars 2, yes, it may be a little bit difficult to find your feet, but you can also sell your stuff for a lot more money, okay? When I was originally grinding and farming for my first legendary, my incinerator, around Christmas of the first year, I remember being incredibly excited and crazed at the idea of getting 40 gold in a day, which I managed to do. I got 40 gold in a day, okay? And what I did for this was I farmed the Gw2 temple for ages and ages and ages, killing all of those old ads that used to be there. Me and this thief guy, we spent ages doing it, and you'd get lodestones every now and then, and that lodestone would be worth like nearly a gold, and it'd be like, whoa, or you'd get like heavy moldy bags, and you could sell these for like 3 silver or something. I remember getting 40 gold in a day doing that, and it was insane. I remember thinking, wow, it's only going to take me like 3 or 4 weeks to get my legendary if I keep this pace up. Do you know what I did yesterday in Guild Wars 2? I had a look at my bank and I thought, I kind of want to do something a little bit interesting to earn money. I wonder if I can craft any of these foods that are in the game. I looked specifically at the lemongrass and poultry soup, and I thought to myself, look, these cost quite a lot of money, you know, it's like 15 silver for each one. I wonder if I could just go gather a bunch of stuff in the game world and then sell it for myself. Using just the stuff in my bank, I earned 40 gold, okay? I didn't even have to go out and do anything. This was just random trash I had in my bank. Each individual bit of poultry meat you can now sell sells for some ridiculous amount of cash, like 6 silver or something, and I had over a stack just sitting about. I recently leveled my ranger from level 0 to level 80. I found that as long as I was salvaging stuff as I leveled up, just normal trash things, I wasn't even doing world completion, I was just running around, killing things, doing normal events, getting personal story rewards. I could get anywhere between 5 to 10 gold just between like 10 levels of leveling up just by salvaging stuff and then selling like the iron I mined as I went through, or the cloth and the linen and the silk. This stuff is worth tons of money. Even jute is worth tons of money now. It was really easy to earn cash. And so things aren't actually that different. Like, you cannot say, oh, I remember when like Spark was only 40 gold. I wish I'd bought it back then. Don't talk crap. It would have been very difficult for you to get that 40 gold back then. Maybe not as difficult as it would be to get like 1,000 gold or 1,200 gold or whatever you need now. Maybe it is slightly harder now. But back then it was still very difficult, and nobody has to feel guilty or regret the fact they didn't spend their time better. You'll actually find a lot of those early players are now rolling in a lot of money because they accidentally kept stuff around like a ghastly grinning shield or a mystic forge conduit and so on. I would also make the argument now that for those who are educated, it is easier to earn money in Guild Wars 2 than it ever was at launch. There are now a ton of resources about ways you can run through dungeons. The entire reward system in dungeons has been revamped. There is a lot of opportunity for people to become educated and get a lot of money. These are opportunities that were harder to come by around launch, which again made it harder to get that stuff back then. It's easy for us to say, oh, I wish I was playing back at launch and doing this exploit, you know, that I found out about months and months after it was fixed, but you didn't know that stuff back then, and it was still really hard to get a legendary. So, you know, I see this come up all the time. People swear until they're blue in the face, oh, it was so much easier at launch. Maybe for a very brief window of time. Maybe for like 2 weeks after release date. Maybe in those 2 weeks your average player didn't know the value of a precursor, and during those 2 weeks you might have brought a precursor for a really, really low amount of money. But that's just 2 weeks. The rest of the time, all those early months of the game, it was still very difficult. People knew the value, and just because the numbers were lower, that legendary was just as out of reach on that day as it is today. Finally, a question from the Russian Grizzly Bear, who says, statics, dynamics, or synergetics? I don't know anymore. When I first started playing, I was like, oh yeah, it's obviously synergetics. That's what Liz is. She's a synergetics Asura. And I was like, oh yeah, you know, because these guys are asking the deep questions. They're figuring out the eternal alchemy. They're the scholars and whatever. I don't really think of myself as a very scholarly person anymore, though. And I kind of like what statics stand for. You know, they built Ratasum and so forth. But then dynamics has got stuff to offer as well. I don't know. I've now got 3 Asura, each from each college. In terms of the personal story for them, I think I enjoyed the dynamics one more than anything else. I believe this is the one where you create the golems that fall in love with one another. That was awesome. Really, really cool. So maybe that's my favorite now. Anyway, there you go, guys. That's a Q&A. Leave any questions down below if you've got any questions for me. And, yeah, I guess I'll see you next week. As I say, tomorrow there'll be another log about my ranger when he was around level 60 or so. And I kind of want to do another Guild Wars 2 mysteries, but continue, like, the origins of the races. That's been hanging over my head for quite a while now, and I want to get to it. Anyway, thanks, guys. Hope you have a great day. I'll see you next time.